back to the Daily Grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back pickle biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
Unfortunately, featherweight champion Max Holloway has been forced out of his UFC 222 title defense versus Frankie Edgar. Holy flying flipping flapjacks, this is insane. This fight was already canceled once, if you recall. When were these guys scheduled to fight? I forget the exact day. Oh yeah, Jose Aldo had to replace Frankie Edgar. That's when they were supposed to fight. UFC 218, I believe that was. Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway was supposed to be happening. Frankie Edgar suffered an orbital injury, forcing him out, so he was replaced by Jose Aldo, who took the fight on short notice and was TKO'd by Max Holloway in the third round again. Now the fight was rescheduled quickly for UFC 222. The UFC needed a main event for Las Vegas. They thought they found one. Max Holloway was coming. Frankie Edgar was ready. Boom! Injury bug strikes this fight again. Holy smokes. What in the Khabib Nurmagomedov Tony Ferguson is going on here? And even more similarities. Think about this. Oh wow, one of them is fucking... Oh my god, I just went... Oh, check this out, full-time family. Look what I just did in my fucking... This is crazy. Okay, Khabib and Tony Ferguson. 10-fight winning streak versus a dominant wrestler. Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar. 10-fight winning streak versus a dominant wrestler. Both of these fights were supposed to be happening how many times now? Now this one will be rescheduled for the third time. Tony Ferguson and Khabib has been rescheduled now for the fourth time. What is up with these fights and the similarities, the eerie similarities between these fights, right? Fucking Tony Ferguson and Max Holloway both, you know, got the title the hard way, the long way, that way. Went motherfucking 10 fights in a row, got the interim belt, then now they're going for the undisputed title. Then they're scheduled to face these fucking, you know, wrestlers. I mean, as far as Frankie Edgar is concerned, some people say Frankie Edgar is the first legitimate, like, high-level wrestler Max Holloway's faced. And I see where you're coming from, but Max Holloway, I don't want to take anything away from what he's done. I mean, the two fighters he hasn't fought in the featherweight division are Frankie Edgar and Chad Mendes. Other than that, Max Holloway's cleared the division, and you might say those are two of the strongest wrestlers in the division, but I think that's just a coincidence. Max Holloway's my fucking dude. Thug Thizzle, it's the blessed era, and holy smokes, yo, and you know, the thing about these fights is you can't say anybody, you know, this is just a fucking, you know, MMA gods hitting us with one, because you can't say somebody's dodging somebody at all. You can't say that in either one of these scenarios, because both of the fighters had injuries. The first time Max Holloway, or the first time Frankie Edgar had to pull out due to injury. Now Max Holloway had to. Tony Ferguson and Khabib. The first time it was Khabib. Second time Tony. Next time Khabib. Holy smokes, what is going on with all of this shenanigans? Is it the UFC gods or the MMA gods punishing the UFC for turning this shit into a circus? We don't know. It could be, or it could all just be a crazy coincidence. But the good news is, full-time family, hear me out. The good news is that this card may be saved. Now, your $60 isn't going to be saved because, like I just said about UFC 221, yeah, it's worth your money if you've got it to blow, but if it definitely ain't worth it if you're trying to decide, do I want to fucking eat ramen noodles this week and order the UFC? No, you should probably go ahead and upgrade your dinner for the week, bro. That's all I'm saying, because these cards are not stacked at the beginning of the year. It's crazy. UFC 220, 221, and 222 all are not huge. You wouldn't even expect them to be pay-per-view successes. I mean, we can just talk about it for a second. I mean, it's fight night. This is going to be the last video before we get into fight night. Either way, I mean, UFC 220, we had Daniel Cormier and Stipe on the card, not fighting each other in a super fight, but fighting Volkan and Francis. Other than that, you probably couldn't name anyone else off the card. Rob Font fought on the card versus Thomas Almeida, yeah, but you didn't know that. So, move to UFC 221. Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero interim fight. Robert Whittaker was supposed to be on there, but even if it was Robert Whittaker versus Luke Rockhold, the co-main event's Mark Hunt versus Curtis Blades, which isn't a title fight, probably not even a title eliminator, and this is a pay-per-view. So that card's not very stacked. Now you take it to UFC 222. Now we've got not even an interim title fight on this card. This is going to be a pay-per-view with 0 title fights. UFC 222 in Las Vegas. Holy crap. The main event is likely to be Frankie Edgar versus Brian Ortega, with the co-main event of Stefan Struve versus Andrei Arlovsky for 65 smackers. And I forgot the UFC upped the price of pay-per-views. Holy bad timing. Yeah, nope, couldn't do it. Can't pay 65 for Brian Ortega versus. I mean, a lot of these pay-per-view cards are similar to Fight Night cards. I mean, just at the beginning of the year. Now, keep in mind, UFC 223 stacked as fuck. That's coming up, but like this fight, we've got to get there first. Tony Ferguson and Khabib are the headline of that card. Can we count on that fight to happen? Who knows? The UFC might not. They haven't stripped counter yet, so maybe they aren't feeling like it. We've also got Joanna Rose on that card and a lot of other great fights. So UFC 223 is good. UFC 224 in Brazil. Don't forget UFC 226, champion versus champion, super fight night. So there's a lot of stuff coming up in the year, but the beginning of the year for the UFC is just looking bleak, and these pay-per-view cards are taking hit after hit. I mean, they were already underwhelming, and then you're fucking losing main event after main event. Seriously. UFC 221 lost Robert Whitaker. Now UFC 222 loses its champion, Max Holloway. Both of these pay-per-views just lost their champion, and they were already underwhelming. Holy smokes. But maybe that's, I don't want to say it's a good thing for the UFC, because these pay-per-views are going to take big hits. But if you're going to stack champion versus champion versus champion versus champion on one big card, then you might need these champions a little later down the line. Who knows? But I mean, if they would have fought now, they would have been healthy by then. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about, but it is what it is, man. Real quick, the fight could be saved by Brian Ortega, so let's fucking, I didn't do all this motherfucking art for nothing, dog. What? Alright, I fucking lied. It is what it is. This photo editing program just erased all my progress, but I mean, all I did was put, like, Brian Ortega's face right here, bro. Like, I did a lot. I'm proud of it. I'm not a fucking video photo editor, so I'm gonna tell y'all what I did, so... It's like doing a good deed and telling people about it. I fucking brought in fucking Brian Ortega's face over Max Holloway's right here. I shaved off all the outside. So I even erased Max Holloway right here and wrote in Ortega, man. UFC 222 Ortega versus Edgar. Alright, it is what it is, man. UFC 222 just took a big hit. Max Holloway's forced out. They're trying to save it with Brian Ortega. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. I am out.
Da 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 da! It's the motherfucking DOWG!